When I talk about the Turkic peoples, I often notice that some people try to exclude the Turks of Turkey from this group, claiming that they are not genetically Turkic, that the real Turkic peoples are those of Central Asia, and that the Turks of Turkey are closer to Greeks and Armenians. In today's video, I will prove that this view is incorrect, and that the Turks of Turkey, just like other Turkic peoples, are truly Turkic. I cannot talk on YouTube about many important historical facts about the Turks due to YouTube's strict rules. You can visit my Telegram channel to see uncensored historical posts. First, let us determine what the physical appearance of the ancient Turks was like from a historical perspective. In the 6th century, the Turkic Empire was established, occupying a vast territory stretching from the Yellow Sea in the east to the Black Sea in the west. From this period, depictions of the appearance of the ancient Turks have come down to us, as well as stone sculptures known as balbals. This image is dated to around the year 650. It depicts Turkic officials whose appearance resembles that of modern Central Asian Turks, that is, they belong to the Mongoloid type. Likewise, if we look at the balbal stones left by the Turks, we can see that the people depicted on them have mustaches and broad faces. In terms of physical appearance, they are similar to modern Kazakhs, Saka, and Mongols. This stone depicts the physical appearance of Kultegin. Kultegin was the chief military commander of the Eastern Turkic Empire and an outstanding general who repeatedly defeated the armies of the Tang Empire, which ruled China. By looking at the stone depicting Kultegin, we can see that in terms of appearance, he resembled the peoples of East Asia. Modern Turks of Turkey are descendants of the Oghuz and Seljuks. Many miniatures and stone images have reached us, showing what the physical appearance of the Seljuks was like. In these miniatures depicting the Seljuks, you can see people with very broad faces, narrow eyes, and sparse beards and mustaches. These people were the ancestors of modern Turks. That is, the Seljuks, the ancestors of the Turks of Turkey, who conquered most of the Middle East, defeated Byzantium, and frightened European states to such an extent that it forced them to unite, were in their physical appearance similar to modern Kazakh Turks. The vast majority of depictions of ancient Turks created more than 1,000 years ago portray them as resembling the Turks of Central Asia. If we look for an answer to why modern Turkic peoples do not always resemble one another, this is actually a normal and widespread phenomenon among Turkic groups. For example, if we look at the Kazan Tatars, who are part of modern Russia, they are largely similar to Slavs in terms of appearance, and at first glance you may not be able to distinguish them from Russians. Azerbaijanis, in terms of appearance, are very similar to Iranians. Kazakhs and Mongols also have very similar physical features. That is, Turks often physically resemble the peoples they live next to. The main reason for this is that Turkic peoples were nomads. From early childhood, nomads mounted horses and spent their lives on horseback, day and night, sometimes even sleeping in the saddle, living their lives together with their horses. This way of life allowed them to create a cavalry unmatched in the world. Turks controlled their horses with such skill as if they were controlling their own arms and legs. In addition, they often went hunting on horseback, shooting saiga antelopes and roe deer encountered in the steppe with bows, and also obtained food by shooting wild ducks and pigeons in the sky. Spending most of their lives with horses and constantly hunting with bows, they became an unmatched cavalry and highly skilled archers of their time. In many cases, the armies of sedentary peoples were defeated by nomads. Until the mid-18th century, when firearms and artillery reached a high level of development, fighting nomads in open steppe warfare was extremely difficult. These circumstances allowed nomadic societies to carry out fast and unexpected military campaigns against sedentary populations. The purpose of such raids was not to engage in open battle, but to capture prisoners in a short period of time and then withdraw before the main enemy forces arrived. In regions subjected to raids, large livestock was not always abundant. Therefore, during medieval wars, women and other members of the civilian population were often taken captive as prisoners of war. Many historical sources and modern genetic studies show that during nomadic campaigns, women were taken captive, and later, through assimilation into local societies, went on to have descendants. For example, during the raids of the Crimean Tatars into Eastern Europe, captives were reportedly transported to the territories of the Ottoman Empire. This was one manifestation of international relations and the war economy of that era. As a result, Eastern European women made a significant contribution to the genetic makeup of the Turks. Likewise, in 1771, during the war known as the Shandi Zorik, the Dusty Campaign, Kazakh Turks defeated the Kalmyk Khanate, a Mongolic people, dealing it a heavy blow. Historical sources indicate that during these events, part of the Kalmyk population, including women, was taken captive and later assimilated into Kazakh society. The Kazakhs were also one of the key forces behind the fall of the Dzunga Khanate, a state of Mongolic origin in the east, and many people were taken captive from there as well. These events had a significant impact on the genetic composition of the Kazakh Turks. Some Kazakh Batirs and Khans had Dzunga Kalmyk mothers, that is, Mongol women. Even earlier, during the period of the Turkic Empire and the Eastern Han Empire, the ancient Turks regularly carried out raids on China and also captured large numbers of people there. The reason I am discussing these events is that, due to frequent raids on neighboring lands and marriages with women from neighboring peoples, Turkic peoples over time began to resemble their neighbors in appearance. Meanwhile, the depictions of ancient Turks that have reached us mainly show people with narrow eyes, broad faces, large builds, and big heads. Overall, the ancient Turks were very similar in appearance to modern Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and Sakha. Modern Turks did not migrate en masse from Central Asia. Their ancestors migrated gradually, in small groups. This migration consisted of several stages, such as the migration of the Seljuks, the Oghuz, and the Khwarezmian Turkmens. On the contrary, the majority of Turkic peoples remained in Central Asia. That is, the number of migrating groups was small. When they later conquered the Middle East, and then Asia Minor and other regions, and established states such as the Seljuk Sultanate and the Ottoman Empire, the state rulers and governing elite, as well as the armies and military commanders, were Turks. At the same time, the general population consisted mainly of Arabs, Persians, and Byzantines, who outnumbered the Turks in terms of population within the state. When the Seljuks arrived in the Middle East, they immediately began actively entering into intermarriages with the local population. Over time, due to their small numbers, after 3 to 4 generations, the Turks' appearance began to resemble that of the local peoples. In addition, the Seljuks were a military-politically organized nomadic community. In accordance with medieval traditions, they conducted campaigns toward the Byzantine borders and took captives, which was a common practice of warfare at the time. As a result, during the era of the Seljuk Sultanate and the subsequent Ottoman Empire, much like the settlement of various peoples in the modern United States, large-scale migration and ethnic mixing took place in Asia Minor. The relatively small number of Turks who arrived in the Middle East and Asia Minor, the large size of the local population, and the widespread practice of intermarriage had a significant impact on the genetic makeup of the Turks of Turkey. Therefore, the physical appearance of Turks from Turkey and Turkic peoples of Central Asia does not always coincide. However, these differences do not negate their Turkic origin.